Rick, I'm really interested in the small little flow breakage or damming up of the flow or whatever you want to call it. Um, that you mentioned when an interviewer, one interview, so everybody's agreeing, candidates excited, you feel good about it all, except there's this one interviewer you were saying that is for some reason not quite where the flow needs that interviewer to be. Can you expand on that example a little bit more?
Well, that was a situation where, and I'm just trying to remember the specific situation where they brought somebody else into the interview track, and that was not necessarily I wasn't aware of. My attention that, oh geez, so and so, and it's like, well, how did so and so get? Well, I just thought it would be a good idea to have that person in to interview.
You're a control freak.
Yeah, and you control those things. It's like being back in the ring, and all of a sudden, you're in a match and you're fighting a southpaw. Well, that's a whole different. That's a whole different, and you have to be prepared for that.
Wow, let me give that back to you a little bit. And you are a control freak, and that to me is actually high praise. I referring to the same thing about myself. I talk about my own obsessive compulsive dysfunction. At any rate, you need to have an actual bond, head to head for intellectual comprehension, mutually, heart to heart, with every person on the track in order to bring it all together. Do you agree with what I just said?
No, because that may just be too that might be a little that I would love to, but that's probably overkill.
Right. So that meaning that you can't have that. If you could, you'd like it.
Yeah,
but it's just not the real world. It's not going to happen.
No. You got to deal with you're dealing with companies, and I do have to have a relationship with somebody that is the hiring authority, and I have to be involved, and I have to know that I'm accurately representing the best interests of the client, and this is a real opportunity for somebody, and I really have to believe that. More so than that, to having control or having the connectivity with everybody on the panel, I'm not going to expect that, and that may be a little overkill.
Okay, so we're establishing you can't have that, right?
Not necessarily, no.
Is that a yes or a no?
That's a yes. You can't have that.
You cannot have that. So that's a limiting condition inside of which your art has to handle the chaos of miscommunication, misunderstanding as it arises throughout the process.
Absolutely.
Is that a more accurate reflection?
Yeah. And that chaos causes loss of sleep.
Got it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Pat, I would say probably the best. I mean, we've talked a lot about the difference between, let's say, rock stars and somebody who's more of a CEO mindset. And I would say that's one of the things that characterizes a true rock star is you want to control every aspect.
You can, within the chaos.
To the degree that you can. But the ideal is you want to control as much of the client experience as you can, because you want to deliver, like, to you, that standard of performance. You want it to be as high as possible just internally, and you want to control as many elements of that process as possible so that you deliver the experience you know you can deliver. And everything that's a limiting condition to how much control you have of that experience is, like you said, Rick, it keeps you up at night. I mean, it keeps me up at night for the same reason.
Right.
So I know how that feels. And yes, it is like you recognize the chaos, but you also resent it, because it's to an extent, it's what keeps you from delivering the experience you know.
Exactly. And then you have something else behind you. There's this big weight on your back. And I it sounds like it's a weight. It's actually a push. It really helps, but it's the investment you've put into this. It's like going to a boxing match and knowing that I've given every single second of my time to this. I've not gone on dates. I've not done anything. I've been totally focused on this apartment. I'm going to win it. I'm in it to win it no matter what. There's no way I could lose this. The stairs, the extra stairs, the whole Rocky thing over and over, getting up at 5 a.m. and doing all that stuff. And you're kind of going, you can't, there's so much at risk. It's not just losing the bout. It's all that time I've put into this. And that's what I think about this in my search, is going to the conferences, taking the time to find out and read all the trades and take it home on weekends and look at this and, who's that person? What are they getting so much press for? And finding out that person, going to the conferences and learning who the leaders are and connecting with them, and, all that extra stuff. And then deciding, like, looking at the trades and the industry's having challenges in this area, and more challenges than just front page stuff. So, I take it upon myself to find out who are the leaders in those disciplines and put together a panel for an annual industry conference, and choreograph the whole thing, spending like 20, 30, 40 hours figuring out what questions to ask, how are we going to get this person, and inviting these key executives in these areas that have no clue of who I am. I'm moderating the session at the panel. I get it approved, and the industry supports it. And I'm doing the headline session. I'm moderating the headline sessions with presidents and CEOs and EVPs in these different disciplines. I've done that 17 times in 20 years. And
I've heard of you now.
That's part of the investment I've put into this. So it's like when I'm doing the search, it's not just the search. And yeah, it is the search, but there's more to it than that. I'm putting everything I've got into this and all the connectivity. And I'm confident that there's somebody I know in the last 25 years that has done this, that knows a lot of people, and I'm going to get introduced to. And I'm not going to let anything fall through the cracks, because I'm going to execute each and every step myself.
I had a vision right now, listening to you right now, Rick, of you having turned every single stone on a gravel road behind you. You've turned every single stone backward up until the present, and there's no way you can look down and leave a stone unturned right beneath your feet.
That's the feeling.
I like it. Love it. Pat, anything else you want to point out before we move on to the Lockon report?
No, I think we've gotten a sense of the extraordinary nature of what Rick gives. Mm-hmm. And you can hear the passion come through, and the love of the value that he creates. It is a bit of a slave master. I mean, you can imagine why I might have opposed it, right? Yeah. It's a taskmaster behind him, but he couldn't live well without it. So I came to, it's kind of like, doing business with the devil. He's got a little devil in there, and, but it's probably his angel, not his devil.
Yeah, very true. All right. So let's get into the Lockon report a little bit. And Rick, let's start with you. So obviously you came across Pat as someone that was an influential mentor, coach type figure in the recruiting organization that you were a part of. Were you familiar at all with kind of the methods and the Lockon report before you came to Pat? Was that something that was introduced to you after the relationship started?
I think that was introduced after the relationship started.
Absolutely right.
Okay. So what was going back, I don't know if you have like a good recollection of what your initial impressions, but what were your experience with it in the first, let's say, few years that you worked with it?
My experience was initially built on a good friend and business partner that I initially had, who was recruiting in the energy field and had some struggles. And he's recruiting to this day, and he's an incredible recruiter, and I think highly of him. And he's an ex-athlete, played football at Georgia, blah, blah, blah. And it really worked for him. And I saw how his industry collapsed and how he was able to rebuild and bounce right back through this Lockon report. And that was confusing to me. That was, big picture back in the 90s. And as I look at my industry itself, that I have had to study and become very intimate with to recruit at this level, the numbers, the matrix, what's behind the data it's a big deal, and it means a lot. And a lot of businesses now are thriving because they've been able to, perform at a very high level. And to perform at that level, they need the right data. They need the right matrix. They need to look at the right pieces it's not just one snapshot. And, Pasquale was able to help me as I got into refining my practice and unpacking the practice,
Yes.
and each and every step of that, there's milestones, there's action steps, there's things that need to take place and that impact the bottom line or the end result of the search. And he was able to work with me and customize a matrix, a performance matrix. And, performance matrix is like, it's like, that's going to capture my attention. And as we look at the performance matrix that I'm working on, you pass or you fail, and it's a motivating piece of information that I use every day, that I use every week. And that's when I'm on weekends, I'm utilizing part of that to build what I need to do and execute the following week. So I'm committing myself. This is where I need to execute. This is where I'm falling. This is not working right. I must be doing something. And some of these steps impact other steps. So you can start seeing on a larger scale how this works and how taking certain actions can impact your performance and the performance of your client. It's a great tool. And I go back to, some of the pieces to it for me are performance profiles, being able to connect with a prospect and build a profile on their performance and determining if this person is going to fit into my search and be an active prospect or somebody that I would use, or at least characterize in a different capacity and not waste any time.
Interesting.
I'll respond to that.
Yeah.
Matt. Rick's got this never say die attitude, obviously. And so once he takes on a mission, there is no stopping him. And I don't know if he would have used the words back then, Rick. I don't remember if you used these words, that failure is not an option. Yet I know you have that emotion deeply ingrained within you. It's not that you deny failure when it occurs. You don't. But you deny its threat to the best of your manly power. It's like, you're not going to let that happen. You're just not going to allow it. And that was a huge impediment for us because we were breaking down, and you did a great job just now. We were breaking down your approach to the business. We were finding those numbers that reflect what you do. And because you were so focused on a successful outcome and would not tolerate anything other, these mileposts, as you put it, on the way that have effect, from one to the next on your performance, you didn't want to look at any of them as having been a failure in any given moment. That was not natural for you.
Right.
And so finding that we can break a larger goal, the placement or a sequence of placements of performance for a quarter or a year, whatever, into these smaller chunks, and then triangulate performance and respond to the numbers, and that you have to allow the number to say you failed. You and I fought over that a lot. That was so much fun for me. I love that.
Well, I must say that, as I'm thinking, as you're talking, I just realized it's like, what was some of the bigger impacts that Lockon report has had on me? And going through it year by year, and refining things, and we added some things and took away. But one of the things that I think really helped me was you and Nico always being there and knowing that if there was a problem with the Lockon or something didn't make sense, you're a phone call away. But we looked at it, and we've been doing real well for the last 5 or 6 years. I'm really working on refining and perfecting the practice. It's sinking in. Everything's going great. And we're looking at the Lockon, and Nico and you talk, and Nico comes back to me, and it's just like, I'm overdoing some things, and I didn't know that, and 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week on the phone. And what about, Rick, what do you think if you lowered that? And I'm thinking that would be a failure. 10 hours a week. That's not, but what if it was high quality time and you worked on other things on your business, but relieve some of yourself from the sense that you need to be on the phone no matter what, 5 hours a day. And that had the impact that had on my practice. It was incredible. It actually, I did better and was more active with my searches and got more done with less phone time. And how does that happen?
Well, that's
For you guys to understand the aspects of that Lockon, what they do, and the fact that I always thought, because when you start on the Lockon, when you first started, phone time is critically important to a recruiter early in their career. You've got to be on the phone as much as possible. But I've been doing this now for 25 years, and I'm still thinking like, and that's what Nico said. It's like you're not a first or second year recruiter. You need to leverage this a little better, and you guys helped me with that, and that had an impact.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, Matt, what Rick is saying. I mean, and you can see how counterintuitive it was for him.
Yeah.
People always assume that since I'm such a numbers fanatic, that I'm always going to want more of this and more of the next thing and more after that. And it's like the word more loses all meaning. We always want more, no matter what we get. It's as if we don't have the word enough. And so that turns too little into something that's meaningless. So for the numbers to speak, for them to guide us in our hearts and in our minds, we got to know when something is too little. We got to know when something is too much. And we got to be able to find that sweet spot in the middle where it's as close to just right as can be. And then we go on to the next one where we'll probably have too low or too high or whatever. We've got to find these. And Rick has mentioned a performance metric for people that he serves. Well, that's, of course, what we're looking for, performance profile. And you could use the exact same, let's say, 7 numbers on a Lockon report in an office, which Rick has experienced, where every person in the office is using the exact same number set, but their goals are different and their performance profile is different, so that every person, even if they're using the same number structure, they're going to have a totally different performance profile. And what Nico and I have learned over the years is that the more deeply you build the relationship to the Lockon report, the better it is to use unique numbers that speak most powerfully to that individual. And so it's an adaptive thing over the years.
Yeah, that's really good. And Rick, you talked about the performance model, and that's what I think a lot of people are missing probably in their relationship to numbers, is really understanding and building a performance model for themselves, Pat, like you said, that speaks to them individually.
Yes.
And one of the things that I admire about your approach to numbers, and since I've known you, have tried and still wrapping my brain around and trying to incorporate it into the way that I live my life and operate my business, is that the numbers, like I've run into a lot of guys like Rick, that they have such an internal standard of performance that it's an attitude that informs their entire approach. And so for a lot of guys, they never move beyond that. And that is, as long as they feel like the intensity that they're bringing to the day or the week or whatever is meeting their internal standard, that all is good. Which is great because it usually gets them to a really successful 6-figure level. The problem is when they then try to break through that ceiling of whatever they want to do, whether it's breaking into a certain income ceiling or whether it's breaking into team building and starting to build more of a different type of a business around them, is that internal standard of performance only goes so far. Usually you'll hit a limit there. And if you want to break through the limit, something has to change. And Pat, this is where your approach to the Lockon report can really, really help those people. Because like you said, it isn't about just more, and it isn't about just hitting that internal standard, like that intensity type of level of performance. It's really understanding what you do that produces results, doing the right amounts of those things in the right way that produces the results that you say that you want, and then legitimately tracking it to make sure you're actually doing the things that produce the results you say you want, rather than just the feeling of meeting your internal standard of performance.
I have to talk about that a little bit more. And Rick, I believe you are an absolutely perfect example of what I'm about to express. Most of us, including myself, come out of our educations believing we're bad at math, and that, they told us, learn algebra because you'll need it when you're an adult. And who among us has ever needed any algebra as an adult? There's no algebra in a placement. It's, it's not. And how much algebra is there in the boxing ring? I mean, maybe somebody on the outside who's going to do a videotape and, watch your movement, maybe for them, but for the guy who's got to throw the punch, it's a totally, it's completely separated from life. Then when we get into the business world where people are measuring and monitoring and managing us by some external standard of numbers that is virtually meaningless to us, and that they really don't know why they're doing it. It's just simply a club that they hit us over the head with, and there's no living math within it. And so I won't linger too much further on this, but when Rick and I got together to go over his initial numbers, and there's another point I gotta add in here. Rick, you mentioned your friend who had some tremendous breakthroughs on his own Lockon report and empowered an unbelievable trajectory of a performance on the other side of that. That faith that Rick had because of his friend, not because of me, and certainly not in what we were doing. He's going, if this helped that guy, I got to figure this out.
Right.
That's a really, really important thing. Now, getting back to where I was about the math, what they don't allow our minds to grab hold of, which our minds would grab hold of naturally. We are built this way. All human beings are built this way. But what gets turned off in school, and especially in math class, is that the numbers are not just numbers. They are something we use to represent cause and effect relationships.
Yeah.
And once Rick grabbed hold of that, Rick saw that this number would affect this number, would affect this number, and that in fact, when we had all of them working together, they really worked as a living system. They worked in a holistic way, so that if you let any one of them get out of whack, the others, boom, are going to get out of whack. Whereas if you get them in order, step by step, in a methodical and seemingly not too intelligent way, like just do it, but it's really not. Anyway, when he was able to discover, and you can feel it when you listen to him talk right now, he was able to discover inside the numbers cause and effect relationships that tied from effort to outcome, so that Rick is empowered to determine his outcomes by knowing the art of the system in these numbers. There's science there for sure, but for Rick especially, and for most people when they get to this level, it's far more art than science. Wouldn't you agree, Rick?
Yes, I do. The color coding, it just makes it real clear.
All right.